Hello everyone and welcome. It's Gihan Pereira here. Welcome to this online presentation where we're going to talk about leadership for the future. And the question I'm asking is, are you a future ready leader? And I hope that by the end of this time that we've got together, that you'll have some idea of where you are on your leadership journey in terms of you being ready for the future. And that means, well, I'll tell you what that means as we go. So there are a lot of people here there's a few people here who I know, and there's a lot of people here that I don't know. I won't talk a lot about myself. You can find out all about me at gihanpereira.com. I am a business futurist, so I speak at conferences. I help leaders and teams be prepared for the future. I'm an author. I run some leadership coaching as well, which I'll tell you about a bit later as well. And today, I want to specifically look at you as a leader, individually as a leader for your team, for your business, for your organization. I've worked with a lot of organizations, and these are just a few examples of organizations that I've worked with at a leadership level. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is just to show the diversity of organizations and leaders who are all facing similar sort of challenges. So it doesn't matter whether you're a large organization or a small organization, a multinational or a tiny little business, whether you're for-profit or for a government organization, leaders in these organizations are facing similar sort of issues. They're all slightly different, but I think you'll find that the things we're facing today are quite similar for all leaders because of what we've been through in the last few years. So we've got almost an hour together, and in that time, my rules of engagement for all my presentations, in person and online, 3 simple rules of engagement. I want to give you things to think about, so do what you can to eliminate distractions and interruptions, and take the time to give yourself the permission to think and think a little bit differently, and maybe think a little bit big, because it's easier to think big now and then to walk it back if you need to when work and life gets in the way than the other way around. At the same time, be playful today. So there'll be lots of opportunities for you to interact and engage. And if you're watching the recording of this, welcome to the people who are watching the recording. You don't get the full live experience though. And if you're here live, then there'll be plenty of opportunities for you to interact as well. And the last thing is, I really want to give you things to take away and put into action. So I'd like you to walk away from this presentation with some simple actions that you can put into place, and ideally at least 1 or 2 things that you can do immediately. Even when you hang up, here's something that I can do. Okay, so let's start. Let's start with a little bit of interaction. So I've got a poll for you to start with. And the poll question is this. So COVID-19 has made me more what as a leader? And so the way points that are coming up. Yeah, interesting. Good. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for doing that, because this is very much a case that it's true for all of us, that sometimes we don't know how we're going to react and respond when we have disruption and change and crisis until we're in it. And it's great to see that people are saying empathetic, adaptive, and flexible are the ones that are really coming through, really shining through. And it's a point that I'm going to make throughout this presentation. As we're moving ahead and talking about what our future looks like, for us as a leader, there are 2 parts of us in our leadership job when we're looking after a team or an organization. So, in fact, there was some research done by Macquarie University early in the pandemic. So this was around mid-2020, where they looked at what were this is the heart of the crisis. What are the best leaders doing to lead their teams and their organizations through the crisis? And they came up with this metaphor, which I love, I wish I thought of it myself, the avocado leader. And they said the best leaders are like avocados. So they've got this hard inner core, which is still looking at objectives, business objectives, making sure organizational goals are reached, making sure that people achieve their KPIs. And that was an important part of leadership. But they also had this soft outer layer, which was looking after their people who were going through a crisis at the time. So they were the best leaders had empathy and were building trust and looking after their people, because of course it's the people who are helping them achieve their objectives. So the best leaders have always been avocado leaders. It's just that now the crisis is forcing all of us to step up, or inviting us to step up and become avocado leaders. So as we go through today, just keep in mind that the things that we're talking about being a future ready leader have both those parts of the avocado, and you'll see them as we go through it. I wrote this book, Disrupted, last year in response to the crisis. So this was for leaders to lead their teams through and out of the crisis. And what happens is, when there's a crisis, performance dips, of course, and we go through these three stages. So first of all, there's a crisis. So when the crisis happens, you drop everything, you forget about your long-term strategies, you just do everything you can to survive. You look after your people, you look after your team and your organization. And performance drops because what you're trying to do is just do everything you can to survive. And I think many of us know what that feels like. Then you go through a stage of recovery, where you're not completely out of the crisis, but at least you feel a little bit more stable and you can start thinking about the future. And then you go to growth. And that's when you can start thinking about, well, we're kind of over the crisis. It may not be back to the way things were, but at least we feel that now we can start looking ahead. And I think it's really important to think about the way that people respond to each of those three stages. In fact, let me sketch that out for you here. So, what typically happens is in crisis, not surprisingly, people are just reactive. So all that happens is you're just trying to respond to the crisis and trying to get through it. And when you get into recovery, that's when you can start being responsive. So it's not just a knee-jerk reaction to everything that's happening. You can start becoming responsive and start looking ahead. And ideally, what you want to be is proactive. And most businesses, teams, organizations, leaders do that when they get into the growth phase. Now, I tell leaders when I'm working with them, I suggest that the best thing that you can do if you're going through this curve is be proactive before you need to be. It's not easy, but the earlier you can be proactive, the better. And also, there is a fourth thing that people do. And the fourth one is that there's some organizations and teams that are disruptive. And what they do is they use the crisis to catapult themselves into a new position. And so companies like Uber, for example, started during the global financial crisis because crisis actually does a disruption for them, and people are looking around for something new, something different. And as a result of that, there's some opportunities for them. But today, we're going to talk about these three stages. Today, we're going to talk about what happens when you're going through crisis, recovery, and growth. So those are three areas broadly that we're going to talk about today. Okay, I also want to tell you a little bit later about my Future Ready Leaders program. This is a leadership program that I run for a small group of leaders. It runs for about 3 months. There's a program coming up soon, September, October, November this year. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, but we go through these three things and what it takes to be a future ready leader. And let's have a look at the first of these areas. So the first area is crisis. Okay, again, I'm going to ask you to do a poll. And at the end of each of these sections, each of these three areas, I'll stop and I'll see if there's questions coming in as well. Okay, so we're going to do a poll again. And what you should be able to do, if you did the poll before, then you should see that the poll question has changed now. And I've got 3 questions for you here that I'd like you to rate yourself from 1 to 5 in each of them. And you'll see that you can see most people have responded here. So thank you for doing that. Yeah, it's interesting to see, right? So we all know now that we're going to have massive change and disruption forever. Yeah, okay. And the thing about change is interesting. In fact, let's look at that one. Yeah, let's look at the change thing. Let's look at the change one first. So I've got some material prepared, but I'm also going to jump around a little bit depending on what people respond in the poll so that I can make this most relevant to you. Okay, so if you're looking at the first area, it's about how do we deal through crisis. And as leaders, the 2 things we need are empathy for our people and also to be able to give our people clarity in dealing with the present and thinking about the future. By the way, I don't like the term future-proof. Some people say we need to be future-proof, and I don't think we can. We can't be future-proof the same way that we can make something waterproof or fireproof. We're not trying to defend against the future, and we shouldn't be doing that. What we should be doing is being future-ready, so that we've got the skills and the outlook and the mindset to be ready for the future, rather than trying to protect ourselves against the future. So we want to give our team clarity rather than certainty, because we can't give them certainty. Let me tell you a story. And this happened to me when I was young. I was about 25, and I traveled to Europe for the first time. And like most other people who went to Paris, like many other people, I went to the Louvre, lined up with the millions of people to get a glimpse of the Mona Lisa, which I got to do. And this was in the early days. This was in the 1990s, before smartphones. And so I had a little camera, but I couldn't even take photos because I couldn't turn the flash off, and you weren't allowed to do flash photography. But I wanted to get a glimpse of the Mona Lisa. And as I was standing there in the Louvre, surrounded like with thousands of other people with me, I thought to myself, this is amazing. Here I am seeing this beautiful work of art by Leonardo that millions of other people have seen, and I'm seeing exactly the same thing. And then I realized I'm actually not seeing exactly the same thing, because I'm seeing it through my eyes as a young Australian traveling through Europe in his 20s, like many of us do. But anybody else looking at it sees the same piece of art, but they're filtering it differently. So a local Parisian might see it this way, an art student might see it this way, an art dealer might see it this way, and everybody has a different view of that same work of art, that same Mona Lisa. It's just that we're seeing it through our own eyes, and I think that's true of everything around us, and especially when we go through a lot of disruption. We might be seeing the same situation in our workplaces, in our professional work, and even in our personal lives. We might be seeing the same thing as somebody next to us, but we have a very different perception of it. Our reality is different because it's shaped by the filters that we have. And especially when things change, because we're hardwired to avoid and dislike certainty. So there was this research experiment done where they had a group of volunteers who were they're kind of doing this video game. And the video game was where there was on the screen, there were all these rocks, and behind some of the rocks, there were some snakes. And the way they played the game was you turn over rocks at random, and they made it faster and faster, and you had to click rocks, and if you turned over and if there was a snake behind the rock, you got a little electric shock. So I don't know, they got these volunteers to agree to attach a little electrode to them, so they got electric shock if they turned over a rock with a snake behind it. And if they didn't, then nothing happened. So then what they did was then they gave them two variations of the game afterwards. So one variation was they put more snakes behind the rocks, so more of the rocks had snakes behind them. And in the other variation, they kept fewer snakes, but they moved them around randomly. And they found that people preferred to have more snakes behind the rocks as long as they knew where those snakes were. And sometimes they get them wrong because they were doing it very quickly, but they'd rather have that certainty than have the uncertainty of not knowing that if you click a rock, there might be a snake behind it, even though there's a low probability of that. So people preferred the certainty of a more difficult situation than the uncertainty of maybe there'll be danger. So, and this is true, like we're hardwired to avoid uncertainty, which is why the crisis, apart from having an actual impact on us, also had a huge psychological impact on a lot of us because we had a lot of uncertainty. So people deal with change in different ways, and we saw this in the poll that people said, I know that my team members deal with change differently, and when we've got this change and disruption and uncertainty, the way that you deal with that change might be quite different from each of your team members. Let me give you an example here, and I'd ask you to think for yourself about how you broadly deal with change. And I'll give you an example. This is a real life example. This is picking an example here where people started, remember when people first started using smartphones, and it was very annoying sometimes because they always had their eyes glued to their phone, and you couldn't have a conversation with them. It was difficult to engage with them. If you've got teenage kids, maybe that's still the case. But of course, this was a big imposition and a big change in society when this first happened. And it happened with businesses as well. So there are customers who are coming in to a business and they were on their phone. And let me show you how two businesses dealt with that very differently. So there's one business, this was a cafe in Terrigal, just north of Sydney. And the manager of that cafe, he put on his cash register, he put this sign. So 50-cent surcharge if you're using your phone while you're at the counter. So it's rude. So he saw this change. And he said, I don't like it. I don't get to chat to my customers. They're holding up other people in the line. It's a problem. I don't like it. So I'm going to deal with that change. And this is the way I'm going to deal with that change. Now, another cafe, this is actually just down the road from me here in Perth. At the time, this was a guy named Nino. He now runs, I think, one of the best Italian restaurants in Perth, Papagallo's. Hi, Nino. But at the time, he was running this little cafe, and he also saw the same change, that people were coming in with their phones, and they were on their phones all the time, and he decided to deal with the change differently. So he partnered up with this company called Rewardle, and this was an app where it was a coffee loyalty app. And now there are lots and lots of coffee loyalty apps. But at the time, it was quite revolutionary and it was quite new. Instead of having a little loyalty card, you could bring your phone in and scan the essentially a QR code. And that QR codes have been around for a long time. And you get points towards the coffee. You could also load money onto the app so that you could pay without having to carry cash around with you or carry a credit card. Again, that's really commonplace now, but at the time that was quite different. So I wonder, what about you? When you see change, how do you deal with it? Are you like that cafe manager in Terrigal? So by the way, both of these managers dealt with the change, but one of them said, I'm going to change, the way I'm going to deal with it is to restore the status quo because I like the way that things were. The way that Nino dealt with it was to say, here's an opportunity. How can I make this work for me? So where are you? Where are you on that scale? In fact, there are 6 ways that people deal with change, but I'm giving you 2 here. And I just wonder where you are on that scale. And also keep in mind that people in your team are at a different, might be different areas along that spectrum. Okay, so it's a really important thing that when we're thinking about change, especially in crisis and uncertainty, people deal with that change differently. And I'm sure you've come across that. And just be aware that people see the Mona Lisa differently and they act differently based on the situation that they're in. Okay, so that's the first area, which is around dealing with crisis, and I talked briefly about empathy and clarity. I'm going to move on to the second one, but I want to check first if there are any questions here about that. If you have got questions, please ask them in the chat room, and I will respond to them. Oh, I see a question about the platform I'm using, the poll that's using Mentimeter or menti.com. Okay, otherwise I'll continue. Okay, let's move on to the second area. If you've got questions about this first area, please feel free to keep asking them and I'll come back to them as well. Okay, the second area is recovery. So now we're kind of out of the crisis. We're moving into recovery now. And this might not be even if your team, even if your business and organization didn't go through a big crisis, there may be still people in your team who have been through a crisis and now coming out of it into recovery. Jenny says, yeah, great reminder to look at situations through the lens of the other person. Yeah, I'm on a bit of a mission at the moment to be kinder because we see a lot of staff shortages, lots of challenges, and it's easy for me to just assume and expect that things are going to be exactly the way that they were pre-COVID, and I have to consciously tell myself to be kinder in everyday situations. Okay, so this next area is around recovery. Again, same thing. I've got 3 questions for you. Let me change the poll. Okay, good. So so the thing around planning is a really interesting one. I can see that now that's probably the lowest of these 3. By the way, you don't have to compare them against each other, but it's not surprising to see that in the past, you didn't necessarily have to make lots of backup plans. You kind of should as a leader anyway, but you knew what the future was going to look like. As an example, and how we know what travel, if you've traveled in the last few months, especially in airlines, you know what it's like air travel. For Australia, which has been so reliable in the past, has suddenly had all this unreliability and lots of friction for a number of reasons. But if you're making travel plans now, you have to be even more careful about having backup plans. So for me, traveling for business, have to make sure that there's more time to make connecting flights, have to make sure that I would always make sure that I would never take the last flight available to get to my destination. So it was never the last flight, but now I have to make sure there's 2 or 3 or 4 flights options to get to my destination, and so on. Okay, thank you for doing that. Let's continue with the things around recovery. So if you're looking at recovery, I reckon the 2 things you need to look at from the people side of things is building trust with people, and from the objectives kind of things is being able to take action, that, as you saw from the poll, to be able to create plans with backup plans in place as well. And I want to do this little exercise around, actually, which one should we do next? Oh, you would do one around trust. We'll do one around trust because I think it's the biggest thing, the best thing that you can do as a leader is to empower your people so that you can trust them to do what's required. There's some research done. We're not going to talk a lot about flexible workplace and hybrid teams and so on, but again, there's some research done at Harvard early in the pandemic that said that almost 50% of leaders, they did not trust that they could lead effectively when their team members were working from home. And there are 2 parts of that. One is they didn't trust their team members would be competent enough to do the right thing. And second, they didn't trust themselves that they would be competent leaders, that they would be able to trust their team when they didn't trust that they had the skills to lead their team when they weren't in the office around them. So let's do a little exercise around trust, because I think that one of the biggest things you can do for yourself and for your team is to build trust with your team members so you can empower them to do the work. And we're going to do this with a little bit of an exercise around something that I've been through recently in the past year, and I think some people here would have been through a similar experience. So I wonder if you've had the experience of teaching a young person probably, to drive for the first time. Okay, so if you have, and I'm sure lots of people here have done that, if you have, it's quite an enlightening experience. So I've done this recently for my niece Abby. So she's turned 17 this year, and last year when she was learning to drive, she got her L plate, so she did the theory, and then she wanted somebody to teach her how to drive, and her parents didn't want to do it, so she asked me, and I said, yeah, happy to do that. So I helped Abby. It's actually the second person I've helped. The first person I helped was actually my stepdaughter, who's confusingly, her name's also Abby. So that was about 5 or 6 years ago. And then last year, I was teaching my niece Abby to drive. So I took her through the first 10 or 12 hours of driving. So I taught her all the basic stuff, and then handed her over to her parents because she just needed lots of practice. So if you asked me, do I trust Abby? Well, yes and no. Yes and no. So if you ask me, do I trust her character? Absolutely. Right? Abby's a fine young woman. She's smart. She's savvy. She's considerate, empathetic. She takes after her uncle. All those good things. So I absolutely trust her her character. So again, if it comes to driving, do I trust her character? Absolutely. I know she's not going to speed. She's not going to drink and drive. She's not going to be the getaway driver for a bank robbery. But there's a good reason that the WA police require her to do 50 hours of supervised driving before they let her loose on the road by herself. So I don't necessarily trust her skills, and you shouldn't either, because she may not have those competencies. But she has to learn that. So she has to learn that. So, and in fact, by the way, she's just got her license. So a few weeks ago, she sent me a text here saying, I can drive. So she's passed, and now she's let loose on Perth roads. What I'm going to do is a little exercise here, and I'd like your help with this. So I want you to help me make Perth roads safer. And I'm going to share with you 4 scenarios that Abby and I faced when I was out teaching her to drive, and I'd like you to think about for each one, what is it that Abby had to learn in this scenario to be a better driver? Okay, and as we do this, I'll do this one at a time, and I'll ask you to type in the chat room what she has to learn in each of these scenarios. Okay, so let me set this up for you. So this is the first scenario here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. The first one here, this is about the second time we went out on the road. So the first time was just in a car park. She was just getting like control of the vehicle. But the second time we actually went out on the road. So this is a two-way road. And this is Abby here. Abby's always going to be the green car in these scenarios. So I've asked her, she's driving along here, and I've asked her to turn right. At the same time, there is another car here, which is also waiting to turn right here out of this intersection. So I've asked her to turn right, and like we all know what we have to do, she's waiting there, making sure there's no traffic coming this way, and then she can turn. But what she did was she just hung around there and she just waited. And I said, Abs, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I remember that I have to give way to the right. And she saw this car on her right, and she thought she had to give way. So she'd kind of forgotten that that because she was on the continuing road, she had right of way. So in this situation, what does Abby have to know to get this right next time? So I'm going to ask you to type in the chat, what does Abby need in that situation? Okay, I'm waiting to see responses. Okay, yeah, okay, so this is just information, rules, context, and so on, absolutely. So in this case, it's simple, right? It's just basically information. Abby needs to know stuff. And actually, she did know this. She knew the rule, but this was the first time that she was out operating heavy machinery in public, so she just kind of forgotten it. Okay, so that's right. Okay, second situation, there's just one car in this situation. It's ours. Comes to a roundabout, and I've asked her to go through the roundabout, so straight. There's no other cars in the situation, so she knows that she just has to come up to the intersection, make sure there's nobody else on the roundabout, and goes into the roundabout. As soon as she gets past this point, she indicates left to say she's coming off at the next exit, and then she turns off. So she knows all that stuff. It's just that when she comes to here and she's got the steering wheel turned because the car's going around the roundabout, and at the same time she has to indicate left. And it's a bit tricky for her just to get that dexterity. She hasn't quite got that yet. And also she's driving my car, which has the indicators on the left, and when we were going out in her mum's car, it has the indicators on the right, so it's a bit tricky. She hasn't quite got that yet. So what does Abby need to know to get that right next time? What does Abby need to learn? What does she need in that situation? Just to be able to indicate while she's holding onto the steering wheel and still keep the car going around the roundabout. Confidence, yeah. Training, indicator locator, practice indication, think flexibly. Yeah, great. Okay, so that's actually this is simply a case of skill, right? She just hasn't had enough practice yet. She's done it a few times, but she just needs to do it over and over again till she becomes more competent with it. Okay, situation number 3. This is close to her home. This is one-way road, and Abby's here, and she has to merge. It's simply 2 lanes merging into one, and there's another car, let's say around here. Okay, she has to merge, and she has to merge with with other traffic into one lane. Now she's confident enough to know that if this car's back here, she's done enough driving that she's okay. She's okay to go take the initiative and go ahead. She also knows that if the cars are like this, then she's quite happy to hang back and let this car go ahead. It's just this tricky situation like this where Abby, strictly speaking, might have the right of way, but she's not quite sure. She's saying to me, what do I need to do? What should I do? So what does Abby need to know to make the right decision in that situation? And what does she need? Yeah, okay. Yep, Paul says put a foot on the accelerator. Judgment, confidence, judgment, confidence. Yeah, look, and I think it's not just confidence, because you can be confident and still make mistakes, but yeah, judgment and bravery and experience. So I agree. I reckon it's judgment here. there might be a right answer to this, but in many cases for us, it's a judgment call. And we know, as a result of lots and lots of experience in situations like this, we know what judgment call to make, because sometimes it does depend on whether this car's coming up very fast behind and you say, well, I'm actually going to hang back and wait, or whether you say, I'm going to go ahead because otherwise it's going to confuse the other driver. And there's no real way that you can't put that into a rule book. You can't write a procedure for her to say, do this in this situation. Just need to give her lots of experience so she can build that judgment for herself. And absolutely, as Tracy says, support and encouragement. I think in all of these cases, Melissa says, yes, situational awareness. And that awareness comes from having that judgment. Okay, last situation. Okay, so this is a busy road. Traffic going both ways. For Perth people, this is like the city. This is Perth City on this side, Subiaco on this side. This is Wellington Street, a very busy street going into the city. And also the driver testing centre is around here. So this is a situation that many examiners put their learner drivers through in the exam. So what they do is they get the driver, here's Abs again, they say, come up to this stop sign here, and you have to turn right. Okay, and you're turning right across traffic from both directions. There's traffic coming from this side, and there's traffic coming from this side. To make it worse, the traffic coming from this side, there's also parked cars along here, so it's very difficult for her to see the traffic, to lean out and see the traffic. And also here, there's a bit of a crest of a hill, so it's difficult for her to see the traffic coming over the hill until it's almost there. So, what does Abby need to know in this situation to be able to navigate this successfully? Okay, and a lot of learner drivers, when they come to the West Perth Licensing Centre, they know that they're going to be put in this situation. Yeah, patience. Yep, experience and confidence. Yep, judgment again. Yeah, potential for risk, absolutely. Caution, yeah. Familiarity, yeah, good. Okay, so here's the thing, right? So the correct thing to do, officially the correct thing to do, come to the stop sign and stop. Turn to the examiner and say, I can't see, so I'm going to nudge forward so they don't think you're just going to rush out into traffic, because then they pull the handbrake and you fail, which happened to a brother. He was nudging out, but he didn't say he was nudging out, so he failed the test the first time. So what you do is you nudge out into traffic until you can see, and as people have said, caution, patience, wait until you can turn. Now, what would we do in that situation? Well, again, quite often what we would do is we'd say, it's too difficult to make that turn on the right, so let's turn left and find a place that then we can turn around and maybe come around this way and just take the intersection, do it in an easier way. Or you could say, I know that there are Collins Street traffic lights over here, so instead of coming up to this intersection, we're actually going to come up here and turn in a much easier way at the lights. So we have got, again from my experience, we have acquired some wisdom to say that sometimes we're not even going to get ourselves into that situation. We'll avoid that situation because we know there's another way that might be a bit of a workaround and might be a bit of a hack, but it's a better way of doing it. So when you're thinking about trust, this is the point around this. When you're thinking about trusting your employees to do something, your team members to do something, think about why you don't trust them. And again, I'm not talking about character, but think of why you don't trust their competence. Is it because they don't have the information to do the job? In that case, maybe all they need is information. Is it because they don't have the skills? So they've got the information, but they haven't put enough time into practicing the skills. Is it because they haven't had enough opportunities to be in situations like this to build their judgment? Or is it because you haven't given them stuff above their pay grade so they get a higher level view of what they're doing so they can then acquire wisdom? And I reckon in many situations it's one of those four things. So I think when you're talking about your empowering people and trusting them, think about in situations which of these four things apply and what you need to do to build up information, skills, judgment, and then wisdom. If you do that, it makes their job easier and it makes your job easier as well. Because first of all, it builds up, it gives you the opportunity to, it gives you more time because they do the work. So it gives you the opportunity to do higher level work and other work that perhaps only you can do. And the second thing is, of course, it gives you the chance to work together as a team better and empowers them. And your job then becomes like this. So I'm from Western Australia, which is an Aussie rules state. So I watch Aussie rules. And in Aussie rules football, there's an interesting rule that most ball games don't have, they don't allow. And you can see an example of this here. You can see the guy who's holding the ball with a black shirt, and his mate is shoving an opponent out of the way. So in Aussie rules, we call that shepherding. So the person who's shoving them out of the way is shepherding. So he's clearing the path for his teammate. In most other ball sports, that's not allowed. That would be a foul or a penalty. But in Aussie rules and in American football, it's called running interference. But in Aussie rules, you're allowed to do that. If one of your friends is running with the ball, one of your teammates, you're allowed to shove opponents out of the way, to block them, to clear the path for your teammate. And I reckon that's what we should be doing as leaders. We should be clearing the path for our teammates so that they can achieve their goals. Okay, any questions? Any questions about that around judgment, about, and this is a big area, of course, but I'm happy for you to ask me further questions about it. Okay, time's going well, so let's go into the third area. And the third area here, and you know the drill with this, we're going to talk about growth, and we're talking about, again, I've got this poll for you. So are you a future-ready leader? Got your poll again. Do you have, talking about hybrid teams, do you have a plan for working in hybrid teams? Do you understand how customer expectations have changed? Do you know how to be more digital in your organization? And have you enrolled your people on the digital journey? Okay, great. Thank you for responding so quickly. So as you can see, people are at various levels here, and I hope that you're keeping a score for yourself. So each of these out of 5, you get a score out of 20 for yourself on where you are as a future-ready leader when you're thinking about growth. Let me talk about 2 of them briefly for you. We'll talk about what we've got: hybrid teams and being more digital. Those are the 2 that scored lowest. All of them are important, but they're reasonably even. But let's talk about those 2. Because the 3 things that we need when you're thinking about growth, if you're thinking from the heart, it's about your team. And especially now that teams are becoming more hybrid and people are looking for more flexible work opportunities. And then when you're thinking from the head, your vision is important as a leader, and having a clear vision, especially now because so much change has happened. It's more important than ever for us as leaders to have a clear vision. And then if you ask, is digital about heart or head? Well, it's actually about both. It sounds like something that's all about left brain, but in fact, you need to engage your people on the journey as well. Let me talk briefly about 2 things. So one is the idea of our workplace has changed, and we're seeing this already. People want a lot more flexibility, and I think we're nowhere near where we could be with our workplace of the future. So the pandemic certainly shook up the idea that knowledge workers have to come to an office 5 days a week and commute 2 hours a day to get to an office to do work. And now we're talking about this idea of the hybrid team, where we're thinking about where's the work going to be done. The office is not the workplace. There are many workplaces, and where the work gets done can be flexible. And that's a conversation that we're having now. And I think there's 2 further stages which we're going to see in the next few years. The next one is, when does the work get done? So even with hybrid teams, we're still thinking it's going to be roughly 9 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever work days are, Monday to Friday. But we're starting to see conversations around the workplace of the 4-day work weeks. There's some big experiments happening around the world, organizations trying out a 4-day work week, or more flexible hours, or working with people in different time zones. And that leads to the third area, is who actually does the work. We still tend to think of the team as being their team. and they just happen to be working from different places. But in the future, we're going to have fluid teams where you might have a core group of people working together, but for each project, you bring together people from elsewhere. And bringing together doesn't necessarily mean physically bringing them together. It could be people from all around the world who are the best equipped to help you with this project. Because what are the chances that for any project that you're doing, what are the chances that the best people in the world to do this project happen to be within commute distance of your office? I mean, it's very unlikely, right? And now we've got the opportunity to be able to work from many, many different places and to bring in people for projects. So I reckon this is the future. The future is going to be not only where does the work get done, but when does the work get done and who does the work. So just keep this in mind for the future. If you're already wrestling with the idea of hybrid teams, keep fighting, keep working towards this, and because I think it's only the first step, and the work that you do trying to make your team hybrid will serve you well in the future when you're looking at more fluid teams and the composition of the team itself. Okay, this is a big topic, and I do a keynote about this. I do a workshop around this, so I won't go into a lot of detail because we could be here all day. Literally, we could be here all day around it. But it is something that is very top of mind for many organizations now, and keep it top of mind. It's super important. Okay, and the other one which is really important is the idea around digital. So KPMG, when they did some research, and they do some research at the start of each year about what CEOs and leaders are thinking about. What are the things that they call this keeping us up at night? And 2022, so the most recent report, the top 4 things that are keeping leaders up at night are to do with digital. Change. I'll share with you what the top 4 are, and I'll give them in reverse order. So the 4th one is this idea of digital transformation. So almost half the leaders said almost half the leaders said digital transformation is really, really important for us, and especially in the context of how do we get value from it. Again, almost half the leaders said employees working remotely, which we've just talked about, is something that's really important. And look, I don't like the term remotely because it seems like the people working from home, they're remote, they're not as important. So I don't like that term remotely, but that's what the KPMG report called it. Again, almost half the people said that cyber issues and cyber security is an important issue, and absolutely is. So the World Economic Forum says this is one of the top 10 global risks in our near future, cyber vulnerability. And so all of those are around about 50%, but the biggest one of all is this one here. Almost 70% of leaders said we need to find, nurture, and keep and reward the people who can help us on our digital transformation journey. So this is absolutely a high priority. So again, we can talk a lot more about this. And in fact, I did an online presentation a few months ago around digital. You can find that on my website, but it's a big topic at the moment. COVID-19 pandemic accelerated digital transformation, and this is just one piece of research done by McKinsey. Some organizations are saying it compressed 10 years of transformation and change into a year or two, because we were forced to do it. And the point that I made earlier, which I'll make again, is that digital starts with people, not technology. So make sure you bring your people along on the journey as well. So I was pleased to see in that poll that we did earlier that many people said that they are already engaging their people on the digital journey. And we just need to go further with that as well and keep that up. Okay, so any last questions? So this is a summary. We talked about these 3 things. We talked about in crisis, the skills that we need as a leader around empathy and clarity. Going through recovery, we want to build trust with our team members and also help them take action for the future, even in an uncertain future. And then when we're talking about growth, we want to really look at the way our teams operate. We want to have a really clear vision for the future and absolutely embrace digital as much as you can. Just one thing I want to say about digital, it does not mean that everything you do has to be digital. So if you're working in some sort of business that has very personal touch and interacting with people, absolutely keep doing that. But you can still be digital behind in being able to take advantage of things that work internally in your organization. You may be able to use artificial intelligence to be able to serve your customers better and optimize your internal processes. So digital does not mean that you're no longer high touch. You can still be high tech and high touch as well. Okay, I want to tell you about my before we do that, I just want to tell you, like, we've done this program, we've done this survey, and we've talked about these 3 areas. You will have by now, you will have some ratings in each of these 3 areas. And if you think about what we've done, you would have a score out of 15 here, a score out of 15 here, and a score out of 20 here. And just for yourself, what have you scored? What have you scored? So if you want to add it all up, it's out of 50, but I'm less interested in the total score out of 50, more interested in how you scored in each of those 3 areas. And there is on my website an online version of this survey, which goes into more detail. There's 21 questions in the survey rather than the 10 that I've asked you here. So you can go to my website and do the full survey if you want to. And as I said earlier, I am also running a program around this, and this is called the Future Ready Leaders Program. This is a program that runs for 3 months. It's the next version of that is coming up soon, September, October, and November, and it takes a small group of leaders together, between 10 and 12 leaders usually. So the last one we ran was from May to July. We had about 12 people in the group. It's mostly around leaders around Australia, just the way that the people I know, but last time we had somebody from New Zealand, we had somebody from Germany as well. That's unusual. It's just one of my clients, a large client in Germany. She wanted one of her team members to join the program, so we had to cross different time zones. And the purpose of the program, let me tell you briefly about it, is it's about exactly what we've talked about today: how to become more of a future-ready leader. And there are 3 elements to it broadly. So the first thing is you get access to me. So over that 3 months, you have some one-on-one coaching calls with me, roughly 1 a month, but really it's unmetered, and you can talk to me anytime you want to during that time. So you get direct access to me to talk about your leadership challenges, to bounce ideas off me, to just use me as a sounding board, or to ask for my advice in this area. And the second one, and I think this is the most valuable part of it, is every 2 weeks we have a group coaching session. So it'll be kind of in an environment like this. Is all done online, so there's no travel costs involved and no travel time, and it'll be, instead of me presenting like I've done today, it'll be more like a share an idea, and there's lots of time for people to work on the idea in that time, and the content varies depending on what people want. So at the start of the program, I survey people to find out what their biggest challenges are, and then we tailor the program to suit them. Just to give you an idea, last time we did it, so this is the group that's just completed, the sessions that we had, one was around how you position yourself. The next one, we did a session around productivity, so you never become a slave to your inbox ever again, all your meetings run to time, and so on. Then we did one about the biggest leadership challenge that you're having with your people. We did one around planning for the future, even when the future is uncertain. How do you create plans with backup plans? We did a session around how do you lead your people when things are uncertain and they're not sure what the future holds for them. Many of the people said that they wanted some help with communication skills, so I ran a session called Magnetic Messages. So not necessarily presenting, but doing one-on-one communication, and so it's not necessarily big presentations like this. And the last session we had was goal setting in an uncertain environment. And that's just an example. The program changes each time depending on what people's needs and requests are. And the third thing that happens is, third thing that's included in that is some online resources for the leaders in the program to take the ideas and then use them with their team as well. So the program's not only for the leaders themselves, but they can then share the ideas with their team. So the next version of the program, as I said, is coming up soon. It's September, October, November. You can find out the details at futurereadyleaders.today. and that'll take you to a page where you can read all about it. You can see the dates, so the dates of the group coaching sessions, you can see them on there. You don't have to attend them all because I do record them all, but ideally you'd want to attend as many as possible. But you also get that one-on-one coaching with me as well during the program. It's $1,000 a month, so it's $3,000 for the program, and it goes over that 3-month period, and all the resources that you get for your team you get to keep forever, so you get the license to use them even after the program's complete. If you're interested, go to futurereadyleaders.today. I think when you read through that, you probably have one of 3 responses. You might go, yes, please, Gihan, love to do the program. If that's the case, there's an enrollment form, fill it in there, and as long as there's space is available, you're in. You might go, no, not quite right for me, doesn't quite align, the dates, the start don't align with the dates, or for whatever reason, I don't think it's right for me or for one of my team members. Or you might go, maybe this would be something I'm interested in, I'm kind of interested. If that's the case, then let's have a chat. You can schedule a phone call with me and we can have a chat about what you think, and I can tell you whether the program will be a good fit for you or not. So as I said, futurereadyleaders.today. And look, I reckon if have a look at your scores, have a look at the scores that you came up with, and I reckon if you want to improve in any of those 3 areas, I can help you with that. And if it's not me, then figure out where you're going to get that help from. So just keep that in mind, that if you want to improve, find a way to do it. And I hope it's with me. I think every time I run the program, it's different. It's always a very enthusiastic group of people who take part in it, and I'd love to have you in it as well. Okay, so to finish off, the last message that I often leave in my presentations is, don't wait for things to be perfect. Don't wait for all your ducks to line up in a row. Start before you're ready, because the world won't wait for you. Thanks everyone for coming along. Thanks for interacting and engaging. Hope you have a good day. Stay safe and healthy. I'll see you in the future. Bye for now.